Maybe
What do
that
you
will be
prefer?
good idea. Once you start speaking, you can start sharing screen. I don't know.
Okay.
See, this is also fine if you want to keep this as a slide. That's also fine.
Well, when people log in, they can see this, and then I can stop sharing if you want to make the screen focus on
Oh,
on
that sounds good.
whoever's
That
speaking.
sounds
Yeah,
good.
good.
हो गया बाल पूरा कट कर दिया ना
Yeah.
बाल निकल गए हैं वो
Yeah. You. I hope you recognize Malapilia, sir.
सर
Yes,
गुड
John.
मॉर्निंग
Hello, Jai Bhim.
गुड
Yep,
मॉर्निंग
good
गुड
evening.
मॉर्निंग वेलकम सर थैंक यू वेरी मच
Yes, thank you for the invitation. Pleasure to be here.
सर योर टॉपिक आल्सो आई थिंक वेरी गुड idea to nowadays it's very need to discuss.
Good, good. I'm glad if it can be useful to people in some way.
Yes, yes.
So, Lakshmaya, sir, this has been going on for some time, this series, no?
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is the uh,
59, sir. 58.
Okay.
right. Another thing is nobody organizing like this without break,
Okay.
without interrupt, without break. Whatever schedule we are continuing.
So it's been now over 1 year. That's
Yes, sir. 1 year, more than 1 year. November
wow.
to we are planning to January
Okay. Very good.
2026. 26th January of 2026, we are going to have an conclave of galaxy of scholars.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever they gave lectures in this series, we are inviting all the scholars to meet in India at Hyderabad.
Okay. Very nice.
Our invitation also to you, sir, we can discuss the things, formalities. How can we go about?
Okay. Great. Great.
Please keep in your mind.
Do you know when that might be?
I will discuss with Professor Santosh. Then we can plan it.
Okay. Yes, I'll be teaching here at my university. So depending on the timing, I'll have to sort of see if I can come to India or not.
Sir, you are Michigan State University.
Yes, Michigan State, in the center of Michigan.
The city also the Michigan?
The city is called East Lansing.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Which state?
Sometimes people get confused. There is another university called Michigan or University of Michigan. That's a different university.
Okay.
So Michigan State is bigger. It has tries to be more accessible to more people.
Sir.
So, yep, that's what we do.
Which you are religious studies. Okay.
Yep, religious studies department. So studying all different kinds of religions as part of culture and society. So
Sir.
when we don't take a position on promoting a religion or criticizing a religion, it's all to be studying for sort of intercultural understanding.
Sir. Can start in 5 minutes, sir. We will wait for 5 minutes more.
Okay, very good.
Are you came sometime to India?
I come sometimes. I'm also going these days to Taiwan and Japan. The last time I was in India was in September. September
Previously,
I was there.
you are visited to India.
I'm sorry?
Previously, anytime you visited India.
So the last time was in September last year.
Oh,
I was
20
there in
2024.
2024. Yes, I was mainly in Nagpur.
Okay.
Hmm
Which places you visited?
So I went to especially to east of Nagpur to meet with some contacts there. So actually I met Santosh's father, went to his hometown, and a number of other places. So we didn't quite get to Chandrapur, but we got in that area. Yeah. So
That Chandrapur is the border of our state, Telangana.
yes.
Chandrapur
Right.
is the border of Telangana state.
hmm
Telugu.
hmm
That is the coal mines area.
Right, right. And so, yes, we traveled a little bit in this area. Some people call it the Jaripatti. Um, Chandrapur, Gadchiroli,
Yes,
um,
yes.
Gondia, yeah,
Gondia,
that
Gondia.
area. hmm hmm
లక్ష్మీ సార్
Ravi.
సార్ రాము జాయిన్ అవుతున్నారు. నేను ఒక
No problem.
మీరు పరిచయం చేస్తారు కదా,
No
మీరు పరిచయం చేసి మన సంతోష్ సార్కి ఇచ్చేసి రాము విల్ టేక్ కేర్ సార్. నేను ఒక హాఫ్ అన్ అవర్ ఉండి మళ్ళీ నేను
No problem. You can go.
ఓకే సార్.
మీరు వెళ్ళండి. రాము
ఓకే సార్.
ఉన్నాడా?
ఇంకా వస్తాడు, ఇప్పుడు ఆల్రెడీ వచ్చి వెళ్ళాడు, మళ్ళీ వస్తాను 30 నిమిషాలు వచ్చినాక వెళ్తాను.
Santosh, can we start
Yes. Yes,
in I think 2 minutes?
I will. Yes.
Is the screen looking the way that it should right now? Can you see the front
Yeah.
slide?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you like me to stop sharing or shall I continue like this?
You can continue like this. It's okay.
Okay, very good.
Santosh, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, formally, Jai Bhim to all, and I welcome all of you in the series of celebrity talk series, and we are celebrating the 75th year of Indian Constitution, which is the document who is holding democracy, one of the largest democracy in the world, and it's holding democracy successfully in spite of political fluctuations that world is witnessing in our own time. But still the spirit and the values and the ethos are upheld by the Indian Constitution. uh, Values like liberty, equality, fraternity, justice, and self dignity. Uh, these are the fundamental pillars that the chief architect of the Indian Constitution, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, has led for every citizen uh, of India. Friends, we are here on 58th series, lecture 50th in the series of lectures, and I'm very happy to have with us a very uh, community engaged scholar, and also a very dedicated practitioner of the values that Dr. Ambedkar has taught for humanity with us, uh, uh, Dr. John Coiney. I'm very happy to have on behalf of CDS and all the organizations like Indian Institute of Dalit Studies, Center for Dalit Rights, National Alliance for Social Justice, Dalit Coalition, People's Campaigning for Socio-Economic Equity, Dalit Bahujan Front, National Movement for Land Labor and Justice, Dalit Human Right Defender Network, and National Council of Women Leader. This is the probably a first time a lot of Dalit organizations or Ambedkarite organizations came together to celebrate and uphold the spirit and the values that Dr. Ambedkar taught to India. We are discussing or going to hear extremely important aspect of Indian Constitution, and which, as Dr. Ambedkar says, the root of democracy lies in fraternity. Uh, and of course, he relates that with Maitri, which probably uh, John will explore further. So, the topic today is the fraternity, the Constitution, Dr. Ambedkar's thought, and beyond. Let me briefly introduce Professor John Coiney. He is a scholar of religion and social history and trans regionalism, working especially in Western India, Taiwan, and Japan. So he covers a large territory in his research. His current research traces the legacies of Dr. Ambedkar's conversion to Buddhism in 1956 as they play out among his followers within India and beyond. Uh, this community engaged scholarship documents what Buddhism means and does for Ambedkarite professionals as they migrate and settle internationally, thereby offering window into changing nature of religion, spirituality, and cultural identification today. Uh, Professor Coiney's earlier scholarship was focused on popular devotional bhakti movement in India and their relationship to caste, especially with the Warkari tradition in Western Maharashtra between 1600 and present. He's published a wonderful book titled Shared Devotion, Shared Food, Equality, and the Bhakti and the Bhakti caste question in Western India, that explores how the idea of social equality became normative for analyzing Bhakti traditions' social effect, displacing earlier non dualist and theological terms that Marathi authors used to speak about caste and Bhakti. Professor Koini also co-edited regional communities of devotion in South Asia, insiders, outsiders, and interlopers on Bhakti tradition and their many others. Uh, Professor Koini has published articles in journal, edited books, and encyclopedia on Bhakti and Marathi literature and comparative trans-regional studies, as can be found in the ORCID site. Professor Koini also his work has been supported by Fulbright Fellowship, the American Institute of Indian Studies, that's the connection with India, the AAS, Northeast Asia Council, the American Library Association. He's also had a postdoctoral fellowship in Gottingen and Hudson and other grants. He has been a visiting research fellow at Max Weber, a colleague in the University of Erfurt, Oxford University, University of Tokyo, National University of Taiwan, and Academia Sinica. He he is deeply engaged with Ambedkarite, Buddhist, and transnational Buddhism, cross-cultural translation, Bhakti tradition, Dalit and subaltern movement, social history, and historiography, equality studies, food in religion and society, early modern Marathi literature, and transregionalism, comparative studies. These are the main focus and area of interest Professor Cohen is engaged with. Apart from that, friends, his academic engagement and scholarship, he is a great friend to Ambedkarite movement in India. He is a great well-wisher and always cherishes the values that Dr. Ambedkar has taught to India and probably its relevance to the world in today's time we are passing through. So I'm honored and I'm very happy to have Professor John Coyne with us, who is teaching at the moment in the Religious Studies Department at Michigan State University. So I would not stand between you and John for a long time, but I welcome Professor John Coyne to share his insights with us on the Constitution, Dr. Ambedkar's thought, and beyond. Welcome, Professor John Coyne.
Well, thank you, Santosh. I'd like to express my own gratitude to Professor Raut here, to Lakshmaya sir, to the Samvidan Samalochan series for inviting me to be with you. I'm actually quite excited to be talking with this particular group because judging by the number of different sponsors for it and by the things that Santosh has told me a little bit in advance about some of the people who are probably listening, this is a different group of people that I'm usually talking to. And so I'm very much looking forward to getting feedback and to coming into future conversation with you all. So thank you all for the opportunity to be with you and share some of my thoughts. So what I'm going to talk about in this presentation, I'm going to say a little bit more about my background, only because I think it helpfully places where I'm coming from in my observations. I'm sure that, and Santosh has told me that some of the listeners in this talk here are probably coming from the Hyderabad area and in southern India. This is a different geographic and linguistic and cultural location than a lot of my observations are based on. And so there are certainly going to be some disparities between some things that I say and things that some of the listeners will find natural and obvious, that we can, I think, entirely expect. If I say a little more about my background, I think this will help make it clear. The bulk of my conversation, though, will be about the concept of fraternity according to Dr. Ambedkar. Obviously, this word existed before Dr. Ambedkar, but he used it in a couple important arenas, which I think are useful to observe closely to see how this word has some slightly different meanings in his political writings, including in the Constitution, and in his writings about Buddhism. And then I'll take a step and move a little bit beyond India for thinking about how might Ambedkarite people today who are living outside India think about fraternity, especially if we're thinking about fraternity in relation to the Indian Constitution and the Indian nation. What does it mean for people living beyond India? And how could fraternity, according to Dr. Ambedkar's vision, how might that be useful for people in the larger world who are not even necessarily of Indian or of Ambedkarite background? And then I'll conclude with some reflections about the things that I've said. So, a little bit about my background. I've been coming to India since 1995 when I was a college student. I was introduced through a study abroad program where I started learning Marathi, lived in the city of Pune. Maharashtra and Marathi have been the basis of most of my experience in India. Altogether, out of the probably 15 to 20 times I visited India, I've lived in India for a total of 4 years. So this is fairly substantial for a foreigner who did not grow up in India. I want to highlight that Maharashtra and Marathi really are my base for understanding and encountering India. The country is obviously huge, a lot of diversity. I've spent I've spent a little bit of time in southern India, but I recognize that there sometimes feel like a tourist because I don't speak the local languages. I don't have that knowledge-based background that I do in Maharashtra and with Marathi. My focus in a scholarly way has really been on social hierarchy, so the caste and untouchability, and how different kinds of religious traditions at different moments among different groups of people have dealt with caste and untouchability. How the idea, especially of equality, has come in the 19th century and the 20th century, and people then have debated about how to actually bring that into reality. So religion, social history, and social change are really the emphases of what I've been studying. As Professor Raut mentioned, most of my scholarship in the past has been on Bhakti traditions and the issue of caste there. Because I focus on Maharashtra and Marathi, this folds over very well into learning about Dr. Ambedkar. One of my teachers, for those of you who might be aware of this person, one of my teachers was Eleanor Elliott, so I've been learning about Dr. Ambedkar for a very long time. He is not somebody that I've just encountered recently. And so this shift in my attention towards Dr. Ambedkar and Ambedkarite studies has occurred, especially since 2014, 2015. Alongside with that, I've started visiting Nagpur, which is different than where I used to go in western Maharashtra, especially around Pune. So since 2004, I've been going there, and I became very interested, especially in Dr. Ambedkar's Buddhist legacy, of what Buddhism means and does for people who follow him, focused especially on Nagpur. If we were looking at Ambedkarite Buddhists in Mumbai, we would have sort of a different view of what Buddhism means and does there. I just want to point out I'm especially focused on Nagpur and increasingly the transnational connections that Ambedkarite people make with Buddhists from Taiwan and Japan, who have very different ideas about Buddhism. As part of this research, I've also been looking at Ambedkarite labor migration. So Ambedkarite people, especially from the Nagpur and Vidarbha areas, who have gotten high training and then moved abroad to work and sometimes to relocate. So places like Japan, the Middle East, the UK, Western Europe, and North America. I've been to all of these places and been speaking with Ambedkarites in all of them. This is part of an ongoing research project that I'm writing a book about. And so this is informing my view of the things that I'll be talking about here. So the reason I point this out again is that my base for thinking about Ambedkar and fraternity and religion has really been the conversations that I've had with Eastern Maharashtrian Ambedkarite Buddhists. Obviously, there's lots of Ambedkarites who are not Buddhist. There are lots of Ambedkarites who are not Maharashtrian, and a lot of Ambedkarites who don't come from Eastern Maharashtra. And those settings will be very different. And I expect that a lot of you who are listening to this will see that very vividly, that a lot of the things that I say may apply very well to Eastern Maharashtra, but maybe not so much to the other parts of the country. And I would look forward to receiving your feedback. But even in all of these cases, if something that I say seems a little bit off center, or it doesn't seem to entirely make sense, I hope that what I present or talk about at least can bring some new ideas or some new conversations to light. And if I'm wrong about something, I'm wrong in a productive way that can continue the conversation. And of course, I would also always be very welcome to hearing from you if you think that there's something that I need to rethink or change my ideas about. My goal in this talk is really to raise questions for thinking further about fraternity and Dr. Ambedkar's legacy today. It's not to present conclusions and arguments for how people ought to be thinking. So I thank you for your attention and your understanding as I present these things. I'd like to talk about the topic of fraternity in Dr. Ambedkar's thought and writing. As he's talked about this in many different contexts, this word has had some different meanings. The two main areas that I'd like to focus on are his political writings and his Buddhist writings, where the word fraternity resonates in somewhat different ways. Because this term moves across different realms of discourse, and it is a fairly central term, it strikes me that this is something of an important but neglected concept among Ambedkarites. I'm going to say neglected because based on my conversation with Ambedkarites, based on my reading of Ambedkarite literature and things, there's lots of talk of equality, definitely. And there are other concepts of justice and things like that that people talk about very often. I find, and I could be incorrect, but I find that the word fraternity does not become quite so central in the same way that the word equality has. If I'm correct, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm correct, this I think could be an interesting and useful concept for bringing more into conversation among Ambedkarites and thinking about community building and how they want to live in India and in other places today, and how they find alliances with other groups. As I'm thinking about the term fraternity in this way, this is going at this, looking at something of a concept analysis, both for the sake of understanding Dr. Ambedkar and what he meant by the word fraternity in different contexts, but also, and I would say more importantly, it's to expand our understanding of what fraternity could be, how we ought to understand or how we could understand that word, so it expands the social constructive possibilities for us now. Something that I've always found, especially as a teacher of undergraduate students here and talking with undergraduates and graduate students in many other parts of the world, is that the words and concepts that we have in our minds sometimes limit us in the ways that we can perceive the world and the ways then we can act in the world. So if we develop further, we adopt new words or develop concepts even further, it not only allows us to analyze and understand the world in different ways, but it positions us to be able to act in it differently. And this is, I hope, something that could come out of this conversation about fraternity. Maybe opening up new ways of understanding what the important things are in front of us that we need to be engaged in, and how we do this in a productive way. So, in the first realm, looking at how Dr. Ambedkar talked about fraternity in his, I would say, more political writings, look at The Annihilation of Caste, published in 1935. This is just one snippet in which he talks about fraternity. He's already discussing some other topics, and then he moves into this statement right here. This is fraternity, which is only another name for democracy, equating democracy and fraternity very closely. Democracy is not merely a form of government. It's primarily a mode of associated living, of conjoint communicated experience. So of people connecting with each other and communicating with each other and having an experience that is something in common. Fraternity is part of this. It is essentially an attitude of respect and reverence towards fellow men. And here, writing in 1935, obviously, we should be including women as well. So, an attitude of respect and reverence towards people coming together. This is fraternity. If we look at the preamble of the Constitution of India, 1948, it says, "We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure to all of its citizens justice, liberty, and equality, and to promote among them all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation." Here again, we find fraternity functioning to locate individuals as networked and connected to others, ideally coming into a unity and integrity of the Indian nation. Moving on into the debate on the Indian Constitution in 1948, we see, what does fraternity mean? Fraternity means a sense of common brotherhood of all Indians, of Indians being one people. It is the principle which gives unity and solidarity to social life. It is a difficult thing to achieve. So here too, and just if you're not aware of this, the word fraternity, going back to Latin, literally means brother. So brotherhood has a very deep connection to the historical meaning of this word, a sense of common brotherhood of Indians who are citizens of the Indian nation. It's a principle providing unity and solidarity, and Ambedkar is very honest, it's difficult to achieve. So this is something that all modern nation states attempt to work towards, is finding reasons that everybody in that nation should be coming together for a common purpose. And as you can see in the news around the world today, including here in the US where I am, this is often very, very difficult to achieve. Looking at another realm in which Dr. Ambedkar talked about fraternity, and turning to some of his writings on religion and especially Buddhism, I'd like to note here from Riddles in Hinduism, the section number 22, which was published after he passed away. He was writing this, and it appears that it did not get finished before then. So he writes, "What sustains equality and liberty is fellow feeling, which the French revolutionists called fraternity." Obviously, going back to the French motto of liberty, equality, and fraternity, which he also said is something that the Buddha taught. So he's helping to locate that there. The word fraternity is not an adequate expression. The proper term is what the Buddha called Maitri. Fraternity is therefore the root of democracy. What Ambedkar is doing here, in my view, is something very innovative. It's something very interesting, and this is why I think Dr. Ambedkar's thought is especially resonant to people outside India as well as people in India, that he's bringing terms that have a usage in other places in the world, so in France, in other places. I mean, the idea of liberty, equality, and fraternity, he's heard that from the French Revolution, but he's also mapping that onto what the Buddha taught, and he's interpreting that and making this really a universal project. This is a very creative thinker who is providing, I think, a widened scope for us to understand the word fraternity, maybe in ways that people outside of India haven't understood it before, by mapping this onto the concept of Maitri. So you say even friendship or a fellow feeling there. So that's one place where Dr. Ambedkar talks about fraternity. Also in the Buddha and his Dhamma, he says, as he's rehearsing some ancient Buddhist history, King Bimbisara said, "I take refuge, Lord, in that blessed one, and in the Dhamma and the fraternity of bhikkhus, in the Sangha." So fraternity here is translating Sangha. "May the blessed one receive me from this day forth as a lay disciple who has taken refuge in him." And then later, what is fraternity? It's nothing but another name for brotherhood of men, which is another name for morality. Which is why the Buddha preached the Dhamma is morality, and Dhamma is sacred, so is morality. So this is, in many ways, an expansion and an elaboration of how the word fraternity works, linked to ancient Buddhist sources, but with modern relevance. So, one final place that we find Dr. Ambedkar using the word fraternity, this is in his Grammar and Dictionary of the Pali language. So Sangha here, he retranslates in English as the assembly of Buddhist priests or the fraternity of priests. So I'm just looking at how this word fraternity gets used by Dr. Ambedkar in different places. So I would say, looking at all of this, there's sort of two scopes, two arenas in which Dr. Ambedkar is thinking about the word fraternity. One is the Indian nation, and this is bringing in the word fraternity, the concept, to help to overcome caste prejudice, to combat injustice, and to combat inequality. Fraternity, ideally, hopes to move beyond that, and to establish shared connection among all Indian citizens. This is a similar thing that other constitutions in other countries do with the word fraternity. This word does have currency in other parts of the world. So this effort of increasing fraternity as a national project is not unique to India. Ambedkar is very open about this being difficult to achieve. Something that I think is unique to Dr. Ambedkar is his interpretation of fraternity in terms of Buddhism. Mapping the concept of Buddhist teaching of Maitri, of friendship, onto fraternity as something that is opposed to Brahminical Hindu vision of how society ought to fit together. So he translates the Sangha sometimes as fraternity in the Buddha and his Dhamma, and he sometimes calls Buddha fraternity as brotherhood, very common universal translation, and the root of morality, which is sacred. The word here, sacred, and I'm a religious studies scholar, so words like this tend to, I find them a lot and am interested in how they're used. We can say this maps onto some sort of divine or heavenly or supernatural or otherworldly piece of reality. But the word sacred can also simply function as so special as it is sort of not challenged. It has a unique authoritative space or a unique authoritative status. And that's what I think Dr. Ambedkar means, is that fraternity, the root of morality, the root of democracy, is so special that it ought to have an authoritative status that informs the way that we view other aspects of reality and our life in the world. There are a couple different contexts in which we might think about fraternity among Ambedkarites today. This is a little different than I was saying about scopes. Different contexts, different locations in the world. One would be India as Prabuddha Bharat in Dr. Ambedkar's vision, where increasing a sense of citizenship and feeling a connection with other people as equals, getting beyond caste discrimination and caste prejudice, that this is a key step towards reaching a Prabuddha Bharat. The question of what role Buddhism has and of potentially converting to Buddhism is still widely discussed across India among very differently panned out and playing out among different communities with very different ideas of whether Buddhism is essential to this project or not, or if it is, in what sense it should be incorporated in people's lives. And this idea of fraternity is enmeshed in Indian politics. If the scope, we're thinking in this case, is Prabuddha Bharat of India, which then relates to the reservation system and all of that. So one scope, very much the Indian nation. Another scope in which we think about fraternity that has a very different set of considerations is what I'm saying is diaspora, Ambedkarite communities. So the people who move beyond India. So in these cases, there is an interregional character in, say, the community in especially the Middle East. We have Ambedkarite Buddhists from Maharashtra, and then a lot of other Ambedkarites from different parts of the country who are not necessarily Buddhists. They get together, they have conversations, and they imagine what it means for them to be Ambedkarite and follow Dr. Ambedkar in that new context. The Indian nation is not the primary way in which they're always thinking about what it means to come together. They're not thinking about necessarily how to be fellow citizens in the Indian nation. They're thinking now in a different context. In all of these places, Indians generally, and including Ambedkarites, are the ethnic minority. And so that adds another dimension of consideration to their thinking. And in many places, especially East Asia, Ambedkarite Buddhists at least, have increasing contact with Buddhists from other countries who have very different ideas about Buddhism, in which equality is not necessarily central. So that is another set of conversations. When thinking about diaspora and fraternity there, it has a different context and a different set of things that are important to deal with than it necessarily does in India. I think it's important to make that recognition. Because my own research has been engaged with these diaspora Ambedkarite communities, I'm going to say just a little bit about that here to highlight this a little bit more. For people who are in India and the diaspora communities are not the most central thing in their minds, I think this can still be relevant though, because we're always trying to expand our minds, our perspectives, the reach of our concepts. And so having some different points of reference that help inform us and move us along further, I think can be very insightful. So even if Ambedkarite diaspora communities are not the first thing on your mind, I hope you can find this still relevant. So I've charted out here just a little bit of a map, having interviewed Ambedkarites, especially Ambedkarite Buddhists, and how they have moved around the world, especially from the 1980s onwards. And so this is a map especially of the Maharashtrians and then also of some Punjabi Ambedkarite Buddhists who are especially located in the UK and then moved a little bit into Western Europe. So I'm not going to go into the details here, but just give you a sense, this is now a global network of Ambedkarites. Again, my background especially is with Maharashtrians and somewhat with Punjabis. There are certainly Ambedkarites and people from FC backgrounds who have moved in other places in the world, and including in some of these places, these are conversations that I would look to have with people in the future, but they are not so deeply informing this map that I'm showing you here. So just a few images of Ambedkarites in different contexts. This is in Koyasan, the capital or the headquarters of a particular form of Japanese Buddhism. There's a statue of Dr. Ambedkar now installed there. So here are some Ambedkarites in Japan who are celebrating that. This is a book from Dubai, from the United Arab Emirates. Since Arabic can be read from the opposite direction, this is actually one volume. You're looking at the front cover and the front cover of the English and the front cover of the Arabic, which are actually the front and back covers. They're bound together. And so noting too that the context of the Middle East, where talking about religion publicly is very sensitive. People have published here on the significance of Dr. Ambedkar, not bringing Buddhism very much into the view because they want to stay safe and not raise too much suspicion about them from the local authorities. Also, in Wolverhampton, in the UK, this is, to my knowledge, and these sort of things change, and please let me know if I'm wrong, but this is, to my knowledge, the only freestanding temple of Ambedkarite or viharas, only freestanding vihara of Ambedkarite Buddhist community that were built by Ambedkarite Buddhists for themselves. Most diaspora communities tend to worship in the Buddhist temples of other groups. They gather there. This is the only one, so far as I'm aware, that it was built from the start as an Ambedkarite Buddhist vihara. So there's some challenges that Ambedkarites in diaspora reckon with. So especially when we're thinking of Ambedkarite Buddhists, the Buddhists from Maharashtra, especially the Mahars from Vidarbha, have been sort of dominant. And as people from other groups come in and have these conversations, there is a challenge for thinking about what does fraternity mean there, where this is not simply celebrating one's own jati, one's own community of people, but of then trying to be more open and inclusive of people where languages differ, geographical backgrounds different, sort of sets of people's networks and families, they differ. This, in some ways, is a challenge to creating fraternity in this diaspora sense. There's also questions of who are Ambedkarite Buddhist authorities. Are monks authorities because they are monks? Are Ambedkarite Buddhist authorities the people who happen to be successful business people? Who has authority and for what reason? Are people interpreting Dr. Ambedkar's vision of Buddhism in a more political way, as another way of identifying themselves in the sort of political sphere, or is this in a more spiritual way, or is there more likely somewhere in between? And what is their relationship to Ambedkarites who are not Buddhist? This is something that people are actively working together and trying to figure out. Likewise, in the diaspora experience, the experience of being an ethnic minority. So of here, say in the US, of Ambedkarites coming and being identified by most people who are not of Indian background simply as Indian. And most, say, Americans who don't have Indian background would simply not have the would not have the awareness to even understand that there are different kinds of Indians and different groups and are facing, say, issues of caste. That's something that a lot of Americans would simply have no familiarity with at all. So a major issue that Ambedkarites would face in their own understanding would be supplemented by now facing a sort of sometimes even racial prejudice. That is something also in a diaspora context that's new. The generational gap between immigrant parents who bring a background from India and knowledge of India and experience of India differs quite a lot from their children who grow up in spaces like Japan or North America or the Middle East, where that is their home for the children. There's a bit of a generational gap. In all of these cases, it really raises new questions about what will fraternity look like here if these cases are not framed in terms of creating Indian citizens. Again, I bring this up not to say that this should be normative or it needs to inform people who are living in India and thinking about fraternity there. I'm bringing this up only as a sort of point of reference, something to consider, and maybe expand ideas about fraternity. So I'd like to move towards a conclusion and think a bit about Dr. Ambedkar, the Constitution, and beyond. As I've noted just briefly here, fraternity's precise meaning in the work of Dr. Ambedkar is rooted in context. When he's writing about a more political realm and the Indian Constitution, then it has the Indian nation as its framing, framing the whole conversation. When he's writing about religion and Buddhism, he's mapping this onto earlier Buddhist concepts and reinterpreting them in terms of a modern word, fraternity. These are not exactly the same thing, but sometimes they overlap. I'd also like to highlight that this is an unfinished project. As you're all very well aware, Dr. Ambedkar died before he had finished writing a lot of the things he was working on. A lot of his ideas, especially about religion, after the Constitution was in place, a lot of these were pretty clearly still in development. This is not a denigration of Dr. Ambedkar in any way. In fact, it's an appreciation that he was a living person, responding to new things that he was seeing in the world. And I think he would agree that Ambedkarites today should not be limited only to the things that he wrote in trying to think about how they ought to function in the world today. This was an unfinished project, which then means for those who follow Dr. Ambedkar, this is something they ought to keep on working with. Certainly taking inspiration and guidance from Dr. Ambedkar, but not necessarily being limited only to that. I think fraternity is a major social resource in what Dr. Ambedkar was writing and talking about. And this is why I'm bringing fraternity up as a major concept here. They're thinking about how do we make and nurture social bonds, especially in India, dealing with all of the different communities, the castes and subcastes and jatis and local communities who have certainly senses of affiliation of region and language and family, but also of economy, also of living circumstances. There are so many ways in which groups in India are kind of divided up and separated from each other. The political project of bringing people together for gaining political power and assertion, that's certainly one arena where it is important to find ways that we can bring people together and find solidarity, but also simply finding a sense of community and going beyond people who are immediately familiar or were invested in and trying to find bonds simply for having a good life and having a good community. The word fraternity here can be quite powerful. And so that also then brings to my mind questions of how do we grow healthy communities in local contexts? Because healthy communities are difficult to create. This involves recognizing chances or vulnerabilities that I think all human beings have to eventually kind of map some of their own selfish and their own self-oriented goals onto the community and think that they're pursuing things for the community good, but actually it's only their personal good. This is something that all human beings face. And to really reckon with the word fraternity and the way that Dr. Ambedkar is using it, I think this is it's important to reckon with the limitations and the potential vulnerabilities that all human beings have in trying to create healthy communities. This is not an easy thing to do. As I said, fraternity, in my view, is potentially a very powerful Ambedkarite social concept. It's a concept for bringing people together. Dr. Ambedkar thought about this a lot. It relates to community building and group formation, going beyond the natural groups that people might already feel that they have. It also, as a concept, connects and translates very well beyond India, cross-culturally. This is one way, if we're talking about fraternity, one way that I think people who have no Indian background can connect to Dr. Ambedkar's writings and see a different vision of what fraternity could mean than what they might be used to, say in France or the US or Japan. So, thinking about how do we talk about Ambedkar as a universal thinker and not only an Indian one, fraternity, I think, can be a very useful bridge concept. This can also be further developed among Ambedkarites today. That's not for me to say. That's something that I would leave up to you. If that's useful to you, then I would certainly support and promote and encourage you to do that. I'd love to hear your feedback and your thoughts about anything that I've said here. And so with that, I think I'll close and we can open up the floor for some further conversation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Kohini, for that wonderful presentation in a sort of limited time. In a nutshell, uh, uh, Professor Kohini has sort of demonstrated the essence of fraternity from political and Buddhist point of view, as Dr. Ambedkar was trying to anchor the project in not only into laws and rules, but to the lived values, the living experiences. And I think fraternity, therefore, Dr. Ambedkar translated in the teachings of the Buddha. He said, as Professor Coyne very rightly said, that this is not an adequate word to express his vision that is envisioned for the true democracy. Therefore, fraternity is the root of democracy. And even when he given Indian Constitution to the first president of India, said that an experience of democracy is not new to Indian civilization. It was very much existed in fraternal Sangha of Buddhism. So there are deep insights Professor Koini has tried to share with us. At the same time, the comparison between political and the spiritual is so pertinent. Otherwise, even in India, Dr. Ambedkar became a victim of reductionism as a mere political leader and not a universal thinker or mere constitutional maker. That's the sort of ghettoized thinking that has occurred even today in India, when uh, Dr. Ambedkar needs to be universalized than ever before. The way, as Professor Coyne very rightly said, how that sort of transcends or breaks the barrier, as Dr. Ambedkar uses the expression in Buddha and his Dhamma, to reach out the wider global community to solidify the spirit of fraternity. And of course, I'm sure John can comment on this. When he was translating or using the fraternity means brotherhood, or the fraternity among men, what he basically means, Old English, what he meant for the entire humanity. He was not gender focused there, probably. So one needs to understand the limitation of language also in Old English. The man as a human, that was the word has been used earlier. So thank you very much for that, Professor Koini, for bringing that beautiful insights on the word fraternity, and also the challenges as we are now talking about Dr. Ambedkar across the India and across the cultures and the uh, East Asian culture, Asian culture. Like there is a lot of interest in Taiwan. There is an interest in Japan, though it's not flowered yet fully, but there are strong seeds. If I'm put it right, and certainly there is an increasing interest in the Western academia and Western Buddhist movement. As I am dwelling among various Buddhist groups in America, I see that there is a lot of growing interest about Dr. Ambedkar, but we do not have a language to communicate what language we should talk about, beyond caste oppression, which is certainly a important central, but also a cultural specific problem. So, as John very rightly said, that it's not just limited to the boundaries within cultural context, but it transcends the universal spirit and universal ethos that Dr. Ambedkar wanted to share with us. So, thank you very much, Professor Koini, for sharing that wonderful presentation with all of us. I again wanted to mention that this talk will be on YouTube, those who are missed and those who would like to share with their friends. That's how this recording is so significant for entire series. Uh, I have seen not questions, but thanks and your gratitude and appreciation for your talk. But before I open forum to the uh, participants, you are most welcome to post your question into chat box. I am viewing chat box too. So uh, with gratitude and huge thanks, are there any questions from participants to Professor Koini? Sachendra, yeah, Sachendra ji boliye. Hello. Or Ravi, if they are not able to unmute, is just check on that from the central controlling
No,
system.
no, 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 not like that. They should unmute themselves.
Okay,
It will not possible to operate in such.
okay. If someone is want to ask, please unmute and ask questions or comment. Or if you are having a weak connection, you can also post your comment or question in chat box. I hear that it is an excellent talk to be noted, which is said. Thank you very much. Yeah, apart from appreciation, if you have questions, I would love to invite some questions.
One thing that I'd be very interested to hear from people also about would be, it's my observation that the concept of fraternity, the word fraternity, does not seem to have as much currency among a lot of Ambedkarites as the term, say, equality. And at least my perception is that Ambedkarites don't talk about fraternity quite as much. Do you think that's accurate? Is that true, or are people actually talking about fraternity and I just haven't encountered it a lot yet?
Ravi Bankarji, can you please mute it if you're not asking question? Ravi Bankar.
What is happening? Hello.
I think just a quick response to what uh, John said. With a growing interest in Buddhism, people are trying to connect the political concept that has been used by Dr. Ambedkar with a Buddhist wisdom, and the connection, historical connection with the words. You're right. For a long time, fraternity has not been established, but it's a growing interest because of the Buddhist connection and the way Buddhist interest among people is growing. They are now trying to uh, sort of connect Dr. Ambedkar's thought with Buddhism. But yes, it's not a. Ravi Bankarji, can you please mute your phone? That's the increasing interest. But you are right. It's not widely spoken as it should be. But I'm very happy participants to comment or uh, participate in a conversation.
Can I come in? Come in. Oh, oh, oh.
Raviji, can you please post your question? I think there is probably a couple of phones must be around you. They are echoing because you are seen on two phone.
Arun, can you ask any questions?
It's another question. Am I audible or not? Because I have
You
some
are
Yes,
very
problem.
Arunji.
audible, please.
Arunji, you are audible.
No, no. It's a very simple, just a kind of query, not a question. While we are talking about the fraternity, that means it's a kind of a concept of togetherness. So, what form of togetherness you found among the sub communities, among the Dalit Buddhists, those who are converted into the Buddhism? Do you have you seen any form of togetherness among them? Like whether some level of intercaste marriages started once they converted into the Buddhism, automatically they are Buddhists, and that means their sub communities will be automatically over. But have you seen any impact that the sub communities coming together in terms of social relations and other? Please, thank you.
Thank you. That's a fantastic question. I think that gets to the heart of a real challenge facing not simply Ambedkarite people, really any people. This is a human condition kind of question, but in different contexts, and obviously I haven't talked to everybody, but in some contexts, yes, just simply converting to Buddhism, then created another sort of subgroup of Mahars who then intermarried and then kind of kept that thing, and then Buddhism was just another identifier for that same exact group. Some did that. One thing that I do find, especially in diaspora, and only because I think I've been talking more with these people than I have been talking with people in India. Maybe there's some groups in India who've done this too, but especially in diaspora, I think there has to be more people kind of coming together across different backgrounds because the numbers work out differently. And so I'm seeing in different parts of the world people start to have to come over their subcaste identities if they're going to interact, say, in Western Germany. So I was there in late May, in early June. I was talking with some Ambedkarites there, so that's vivid in my head, talking about how do they very intentionally try to bring people together who are not of Maharashtrian background. And how do they then work together as bringing a sort of caste critical pro-Ambedkarite vision into a German space where a lot of Germans aren't familiar with Ambedkar, but as there's a larger Indian community, how do they deal with this challenge of addressing caste prejudices when they come up. So that's one space. That's why diaspora for me is sort of an interesting place because just the simple social dynamics of it force people to have to come together.
Just interlink a small question. If Santosh ji permit me,
Please, sir.
what in particular in northern India, what we found, the one very common thing, once the Dalit people become empowered in term of education, in term of class, then they have a major question to resolve their issue of identity. And being a Dalits, they are somehow by all the way they are suffering some level of discrimination. To coming out from that, they are adopting Buddhism. So, how you are looking this, and whether what's your experience on this? Because resolving their identity issue, and that's why they are converting into the Buddhism. That is the major crisis, that they are following the same Hinduism along with their Buddhist identity.
So
Thank you.
I'm not sure that I don't have a single answer for this, and it's not really for me to answer because it's for people who's, there's so much more in their own personal lives at stake. This the decision is up to them. And, I would not want to say, well, this is what they should do. I would just simply acknowledge that it's a very challenging, it's a challenging issue, a challenging situation where dealing with caste discrimination and untouchability and being, stigmatized as untouchable or Dalit that this historically, even if people change their religion, very often people beyond them of upper castes are still viewing them, and so it's not really only a personal decision of like how one views oneself. One still has to reckon with other people too. And then, as you mentioned, like education and class of gaining some financial stability and things. There's a lot of comforts that come with that, and then sometimes people want to protect their interests, and there's a lot that it's a very, very difficult thing. I would just sort of leave it at that. I'm sorry that that's not a very incisive social analysis, but it deals with the fact that people do this in a very wide array of different ways. One thing too I found in diaspora, part of my focus being on Maharashtrian Buddhists is that they're very open about being Ambedkarite Buddhist. And they've noted that in a lot of places, they've very slowly discovered that there are, say, some other Dalit Christians or other people around who have already migrated, but they keep a very low profile and they don't announce that they are Dalit by background. And only in certain very safe locations they'll come out and they'll start to associate in things. But so even the scale of who all has migrated from SC communities, like I don't think even entirely know because a lot of them prefer to stay invisible.
Is there anyone? Otherwise, I have
There
one
is
more small.
another question in the chat box.
In chat box, one question is there. Amit Kumar Bosch.
Yes, what is the main difference, or what are the main differences between the Buddhist fraternity and the fraternity from French Revolution?
So I'm not an expert on, say, the French Revolution, but from my understanding, the Buddhist fraternity is not framed in terms of the nation state. It's framed in terms of people who follow the teachings of the Buddha. And so that is, I mean, I think there is something substantially different, even in Dr. Ambedkar's. I think, to my mind, Dr. Ambedkar himself has reflected this difference in writing about fraternity in terms of the Indian nation and the Constitution, and writing about it in terms of Buddhism. So if somebody is finding a way of associating with other followers of the teachings of the Buddha, that is not limited to one's national citizenship. It's a different, I would almost say, bit of a goal in terms of how do we nurture people coming together well. One is how do we follow the teachings of the Buddha? The other is how do we become a good citizen to make a strong country? And those two things sometimes can overlap. And I think in Dr. Ambedkar's writings itself, this is one area that I think he would have written a lot more about had he been able to live longer. And is still sort of an open question for, I would say, further discussion of like, what does being a Prabuddha Bharat mean? Does Prabuddha mean awakened in somewhat of a Buddhist sense, or is it only in a social sense? Or maybe do we even need to expand our concepts beyond the ones that we currently have? So the Buddhist fraternity, French Revolution fraternity, is sort of a starting point of difference, but I think Dr. Ambedkar is already starting to move beyond that and maybe even struggling with the limitations of the concepts themselves.
Can I come in?
Yes, Ravi.
Actually, thank you, Professor, for your insightful interpretation of fraternity. There are, I believe, I'm just observing the four important themes or the ideas of fraternity which emerge from this particular conversation. One is fraternities is about the commingling of groups with common interest, actually, specific groups. Second is the Buddha's universal brotherhood, actually, because Buddha's fraternity is not confined to Indian citizen or a particular group or particular ethnic communities, but he talked about the universal brotherhood and love. The third contest is the constitution. During the constitution making, Dr. Ambedkar propounded the concept of fraternity, which was quite different from the French Revolution. He talked about the peaceful coexistence a mutual respect for each other and cohabiting in a particular environment. So that was a new concept for Indian citizens, because India is highly fragmented during the earlier period. So Indian communities were warring with each other for their space in this society, especially the downtrodden and the marginalized communities. And the fourth concept, I believe, when Dr. Ambedkar talked about social fraternity, his concept of fraternity went beyond. I would say he addressed the concept of fraternity of bringing all the communities together which were marginalized in India or which were oppressed in India, beyond Mahars actually. But what happened during the process, the Mahars become the most dominant community in this particular context. And if you
Raviji,
look
can you
at
please
the
focus on question, please? I mean, you're delivering another.
my question is
Yeah.
how the Ambedkarite diaspora in USA is mainly dominant by the Mahars, or some other communities are also coexist with that?
It's a good question. Thank you.
So far as I've observed, so the Ambedkarite Buddhist community, I think simply numerically, statistically, naturally, is especially Mahar dominated. But I think part of this too, and this is some of the research that I'm doing, is that I'm also thinking economically and logistically, who was able to move beyond India if they wanted to? And there's something sort of special to my mind, based on the people that I've talked to, sort of special about Nagpur, that somehow people got especially mobilized there. And so I think, I could be wrong, but I think in my conversations with people, this sort of Mahar centricity of the Ambedkarite Buddhist community in the US is sort of a reflection of simply the numbers of who was able to move, and not simply that say that Mahars decided they don't want to associate with anybody else. In fact, what I'm seeing in the communities is that they are trying to associate with other people. And so right now, I think just as a statistical reality, that Mahars are the majority, but that's, I think, also true in India, that in terms of Ambedkarite Buddhist population, Mahars are still the majority there too. So it's not in some ways a surprise. I don't see people here, say, protecting that Mahar identity in the same way. But yeah, it's something to also reckon with, because then families know each other. They naturally want to get together, and when they talk, they celebrate the things they have in common, and that can be somewhat alienating to people who don't share those things. But at least for some people that I've been talking with, that's something they've been actively trying to get beyond and trying to be more inclusive. And that's something very interesting about the diaspora context, is that people are always very mindful that if they want to be bringing in more people, they have to develop new strategies for making those social bonds, because it's not simply by default of falling back on the being of the same community. So it's something that's sort of in flux.
So inclusiveness is very important actually for this.
Inclusiveness is increasing. I'm sorry.
Yes, it's very important to build the concept of fraternity amongst the diaspora.
This is my sort of working theory, is that in diaspora, because there's maybe not the same kinds of pressures that there are in India, and same kinds of investments to have to preserve one's local community identity, of like especially struggling over against other communities, the changed context of diaspora opens up a different way of having to function, that is not so community bounded. That might be harder to accomplish in India. That's just my theory. I'm sure we can find in India plenty of examples where people have striven and are striving to go beyond that. But that's my observation.
Okay, thank you, John.
Another question in the chat box. What are the various features or qualities one should have so that he or she can be declared as a practitioner of fraternity?
I think that's the central question.
Continue also is there. It should be mentioned. Same man, he asked another.
I'm sorry?
Same
It's okay.
person asked a continuous question. Please,
I'll handle that. I'll handle that.
please.
So I think that is the central question. And my approach to it would be for Ambedkarites, for followers of Dr. Ambedkar's thinking, what is the most needful thing for the local community in a certain context? Like, as an outsider, as an observer, I'm not in a position to be able to define what that is. So Dr. Ambedkar, in thinking about, building community, democracy seems to be a very important term to Dr. Ambedkar. I don't think that's terribly debatable. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. And for democratic functioning, like power sharing is important. Sharing leadership is important. And for having a community together like this, there's, especially in a resource scarce environment where people are competing very highly for limited resources, this is hard to accomplish. But of being able to look out for other people's needs in the terms that other people might want and not just in the terms we envision them. That could perhaps be a quality based on my reading of Dr. Ambedkar. But just in general, I think this would be an area where Ambedkarites, if they're not already doing it, some of them I'm sure are, an area like a theme under which they could develop this further.
There's
Yeah,
a subsequent
identifying
question to
qualities and
that.
attributes.
Thank you. A subsequent question to that is asking, is there any sequential order for equality, liberty, like fraternity, equality, liberty, and justice? The order of the words.
Well, that's a good question. I think it depends on what level of something we're trying to accomplish. If we're trying to accomplish something, say, on the national political level, that the sequence might come out in a certain way. I would be more interested on the very local level of like what things can we control? What things are within our power? Because their fraternity and making community bonds, this then doesn't sort of push this off into, well, this political party or this political leader will depend on them to solve the problem. It's like gets back to the person, the individual. It's like, well, what can we do? And then the sequence of fraternity, equality, liberty, and justice. I don't know. To my mind, maybe somebody may have a different opinion about this or a different view, but to my mind, it would be all of them would actually sort of come together. And it would really be in a case-by-case basis of say, how do we deal with our neighbor? How do we deal with our spouse or our child? Or how do we deal with somebody, that we work with? On a very like daily basis, these would be the sort of difficult decisions that we would need to make. That would be, influencing, how we function. So to my mind, I don't know, I find it honestly for me a little bit artificial to think of a sequence of, well, fraternity has to come first, then justice can come. I'm not sure exactly what that might mean. I would say just tangibly it'd be much more in the daily functioning or of trying to increase community or bring people together for celebrating Dr. Ambedkar's birthday or reading his writings and talking about them. How do people do that effectively? That's sort of a tangible thing that is within our control that makes us kind of accountable and responsible. That would be where I would start rather than trying to think of a sequence. That's what occurs to me right now. If somebody has an argument for why a sequence is really important, then I'd be open to that, but that's not what occurs to me.
Yeah, there is a sort of question which is, I don't know, which aligns with the theme in YouTube chat, but the question from Rahul Negi asking, when did Brahman came after Samrat Ashok dynasty, and how they converted native Buddhists to Hindu?
So, as a historical question, we can go there. I'll admit that I'm not an expert in that area. And there's a lot of, I would say, speculation at this point because there's not a lot of like firm historical evidence. Most likely because some of it has been actively erased. But that's it's a question worth asking, I guess, for historical purposes. I would still sort of wonder, though, for thinking about Dr. Ambedkar and the notion of fraternity, this is something that really relates more to today and like how we act. And so, if it's necessary to try to find an answer to how Brahmins and after Ashoka Maurya and after that, how they behaved, if that's essential for how we behave now, I mean, I guess so, but I'm not quite sure I see that as a necessary connection. As a historical question, it can be pursued. I'm just not really sure that necessarily that ties closely to the notion of fraternity.
Well, it's we're up to the time. With respect to the watch, uh, are there any further question?
There's one question that I think had brought up a couple times from this Redmi 10A about Dr. Ambedkar and the idea of racial prejudice. Do you mind if I just touch on that?
Oh, please. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's a good question. As I understand the way that it's asked, I could be wrong, but if I understand the question correct, is how would Dr. Ambedkar's writings perhaps deal with racial prejudice, either in India or maybe beyond, say in the US or something else? The construction of race as a category of discrimination that's already inherently somewhat unstable. These are very contextual, situational things. Sometimes I hear Ambedkarites in the USA, for example, say, well, Dr. Ambedkar could inform how Americans can deal with racism here. And so a racism in the US especially is thinking about African Americans and white people. You know, I certainly would endorse and promote thinking about Dr. Ambedkar as a universal thought leader. At the same time, he's very clearly coming out of an Indian context. And people who follow Dr. Ambedkar have every right to be very proud of what he's done and definitely lift him up. But especially thinking about racial prejudice, depending on the context, I don't know if Dr. Ambedkar immediately has all the answers to everything. And so there, I think, has to be some coming into conversation with the people in these other contexts to appreciate where discrimination, how it's being formed, how it's being conceptualized, and therefore how to combat it. One thing that I really appreciate, and maybe I can conclude with this, that I really appreciate about Dr. Ambedkar is that he is globally engaged. He's working with concepts and with scholarship on Buddhism from different parts of the world. He's got an international education, and it's a very fortunate, in some ways, sort of privileged thing to be able to have that international education. Not everybody can get that, but because of this international engagement, this receptivity, this wanting to find new ideas and concepts from different parts of the world and bring them into to try to address the situation, the problems he's dealing with in India with overcoming caste. This is an international project that I think he's using concepts that are not necessarily from India, but he's giving them a very local shape. He's innovating, he's developing them in a way that works for him and his community in that space. And because of this, it adds new value to these same terms, like fraternity, in an international case. So I would, I guess, make a bit of a plea or advocate for trying to have a more sort of international engagement about this or international sense about this, that overcoming local challenges and problems and dealing with them, it's helpful to take inspiration from multiple places and not be afraid of developing a concept in new ways beyond what it was typically used for. including Dr. Ambedkar's own writings and his own discourse. This is something that Ambedkarites today can still be, I think, very actively doing, and I very strongly suspect Dr. Ambedkar would be encouraging that too. I really doubt that he would be saying, stop with what I wrote. Now take that as your sacred scripture and don't think any further for yourselves. I'm sure that Dr. Ambedkar would not have advocated for that. So I guess I would leave that with as sort of a final thought.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Koini, for this wonderful presentation and responses to the participants' questions and comments. I think it was very engaging conversation, and I'm sure I think those who will view even on YouTube would be very thankful for this insightful presentation. Sir, do you have anything to say in conclusion remark? Lakshmiya, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I think it's a thought-provoking and a new light on our future path. Another thing is it's a really discuss the today context, because so many things happening in political economic level, but in cultural social level also we should clearly identify, define, and go in future. That is the most important. Thank you very much. Anyway, another thing is one request to Professor Kouniji to this lecture should be in writing form. We are going to have a published lecture books also series. So each lecture we should have a one book. Like that we are going to publish 75 books. Then small books and whatever thing. I think my request is please send whatever you are before this November, December. This is my another request. Thank you very much. Thanks to you and Santosh, my brother. I think I need not to say thanks to him. He's a part of CDS and so many organizations in India. And all our elders and friends, so many elders attended this meeting, and so many scholars attended this meeting. Activists are there. All my JB to all, and we will meet on next Saturday, 16th evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all the participants, and for your patience. Next Saturday, we are going to listen another very important thinker, Jeremy Rinker from North Carolina University. Is going to speak about peace and conflict and Indian Constitution, which is another important area. I would invite you and request you, all of you, please join in time and let us celebrate this wonderful celebration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, JB.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank
JB,
you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Debbie.
thanks so many to Dr. John and CDS also.
Thank you very much. Santosh, I will call you in the morning.
Okay na.
What time you are free?
कल मैं travel कर रहा हूँ. I will be going back, so but call me and we'll speak.
Can I एक घंटे के बाद फोन करूँ फिर? अभी.
हाँ